The nature of a remedy in a totally corrupt judicial system. This was written by Jim Rivers and Obi-Wan Kenobi. What is the purpose of this white paper? In its simplest form, it is to address the questions that is asked by almost everyone, so-called freeman or American, and inmate who has ever been railroaded by a totally corrupted, so-called judicial system. For the individual who knows they have actually committed crimes against their fellow man, the outrage of being incarcerated is severely subdued by the self-admission of guilt and expectation of punishment if caught. So it is truly outraged individual railroaded by the system who will be the most motivated to make the corrected effort to understand the information presented here and to pursue its remedies. What is the system? Without a fundamental understanding of what the system actually is and some understanding of how it got that way, there is virtually no possibility of understanding and correctly implementing a remedy. The subject of what system actually is, as opposed to what the system appears to be, could easily encompass a 1,000-page book. A history book explaining the events of the past that led up to the present state of the system could easily fill up several thousand pages. And even if such books were in your possession, would you make the effort to digest the information? And even more important, how would you know it was the truth? Or was it just a bunch of half-baked theories that fall apart upon the serious examination by objective analysis? Obviously, this extreme brief paper will make no attempt to prove anything stated herein. Everything stated within regarding the system will of necessity be simply asserted as fact, firmly established as irrefutable, yet facts that will probably contradict everything you've ever understood about the system. You will either have to face up to the fact that you have been deceived and lied to your entire life about most everything you think you know, or you will remain a victim to the global financial prison that the entire world is now a part of, also referred to as the system. For those of you, the vast majority of humanity, who believe that such an evil global system of grand deception and enslavement cannot possibly exist, the mere suggestion of its sounding like the utterance of those conspiracy nuts and usually dismissed as kooks, I suggest you immediately cease listening to this audio that I am creating any further, as I have no intentions of communicating with the hopelessly brain-dead masses on these matters. It goes against my nature to simply making assertions that are not backed up with rigorous proof, but I am of necessity going to have to just move forward and assert the facts as irrefutable truth. If you demand the truth in life without compromise, you will eventually come to the same truth about the system. And what I do mean by the system consists of all the institutions that man has created to organize, control, sustain itself. In particular, government, religion, and commerce. There are no sharp demarcation between these three institutional entities, and in fact are so hopelessly intertwined that I will refer to them as the system. See the first Matrix movie again and again and again. The foundation facts to understand. The foundational facts to understand. Fact number one, the system in today's world on a global widespread basis is now completely dominated, controlled by forces of darkness, i.e. Satan, Lucifer, devil. This is not some mystical, superstitious raving. The dark forces are absolutely for real, are extremely ingenious in the science of controlling the people's thinking and control all governments of man, and have the vast overwhelming majority of all religions, and in particular all of so-called Christendom, not true Christianity, represented by the harlot. Upon the beast in Revelation scripture, and for our analysts, the most important realization is that the dark forces totally control all the financial economic systems, in particular banking. The principal control lever point of the commerce game and the resulting enslavement of all mankind. There is ample, if not massive, confirmation that one indeed seems to be now well approaching the final battle of righteousness over Satan's pure evil. Fact number 2. Probably as much as little over 80% of the American people still believe that man's problems can be solved by political actions, voting, having an informed opinion on political matters. They accept what they hear on the media and believe that authority can be trusted. Less than 10% of this group will ever realize how profoundly deceived they have been. Fact number 3. The world and all of its resources, its most important being the human slave resource, are in fact controlled by extremely wealthy and powerful families whose ingenious extortion strategies has become the foundation of the world economy, global economic slavery, through the creation of fictional indebtedness by imposition of centralized banking to ultimately deprive the people of all property and freedom. Fact number 4. Secret societies such as the Illuminati, Luciferians, Freemasons, 33 degrees level and above, and others are keepers of arcane knowledge that guarantees the keeping of ordinary people in political, economic, and spiritual bondage. Major breakthroughs in the science such as physics, medicine, engineering, etc., have long been consistently suppressed by these groups for the purpose of maintaining plunder and control over the unthinking masses. Fact number 5. The original de jure Republican form of government given to us by our founding fathers referred to as the United States of America, United being lowercase, States being lowercase, of being lowercase, America having a capital A and spelled in proper grammar, has been replaced by the stealth and deception with a private, foreign-owned and operated, for-profit, actually plundered de facto corporate democracy, not a republic. In actuality, a municipal corporation of the District of Columbia of the United States being all capital letters, being incorporated in England, our former enemy, in 1878. Fact number 6. The state of Ohio, or state of anything, referred not to the legitimate de jure republic, a party to the Constitution for the United States of America, United States being all lowercase, of being lowercase, and America being spelled proper case, upper lowercase, but unincorporated, no physical boundaries defined in their Constitution, municipal corporate instrumentalities of the United States fraudulently established under the Buck Act of 1940. These de facto government impersonators have no actual lawful authority over any inhabitants of the several states of the Union, being ultra vires and nol teal to the corporate charter. And nol teal is Latin for corporation, no corporation. They are the purest form of total fraud and deception against the people. Fact number 7. All the states, lowercase state, courts found within the state of Ohio, all uppercase, or the state of anything, being brought into existence under the fraudulent authority of the state of, have never had any lawful authority over the inhabitants, only over the fictions they create and the trustees of those fictions, never the sovereigns unless tricked into being a co-trustee. Fact number 8. In order to overcome total lack of lawful authority over inhabitants in their bogus courts, a fictional constructive trust, your name spelled in all capitalization, in fact, another federal instrumentality is created under fraud to deceive the inhabitants into believing he is subject to the private, copyrighted statutory whims of the de facto corporate government impersonator. Fact number 9. All so-called judges, who in fact are in the business of enforcing private copyrighted statutes and codes, are judicial officers, but rather mere executive administrators of a private, for-profit plunder municipal corporation, having absolutely no legal lawful authority over the sovereign inhabitants. Fact number 10. The United States and its instrumentalities such as state of Ohio, Nebraska, Colorado, Arizona, Montana, New Mexico, doesn't matter, created constructive trust named after inhabitants of the land, names spelled in all capital letters, in order to deprive the lawful inhabitants of his true identity and substantive rights and fraudulently make the inhabitants liable for the debts and obligations of the United States corporation and or its instrumentalities. Fact number 11. The United States and its instrumentalities, such as the state of, never recognize lawful inhabitants of the land, and only recognize the fictitious creation of the United States and its other instrumentalities. Fact number 12. The United States District Court, as constituted in the several states, a party to the Constitution, are completely outlaw, illegitimate, constitutionally unauthorized, private courts, impersonating the true Article III courts referred to as District Court of the United States, which no longer exist anywhere and cannot be elicited into existence by known means. Fact number 13. The so-called Supreme Court of the United States is currently not functioning as an Article III constitutionally authorized court, but rather only as a high admiralty court. They consistently assert no comment when confronted with the simple question, are you the one Supreme Court described in Article III of the Constitution for the United States of America? Do you wonder why? Fact number 14. The corporate de facto democracy, not the de jure republic, United States of America, went into bankruptcy in 1933, creating a legal vacuum, the void of which was filled by the fiction construct of fraud that led to the judicial system becoming the most corrupt legal system in the world without peer. An identified recent candidate for nomination to the Supreme Court of the United States, Edith Jones, appellate judge, publicly stated, the American legal system is corrupt almost beyond all recognition. Fact number 15. All so-called crimes are in fact strictly a commercial matter, as stated in 27 CFR 72.11, CFR Code of Federal Regulations. Fact number 16. Ever since June 5th, 1933, because of the bankruptcy of the United States, when House Joint Resolution 192 was unanimously passed, becoming public policy per Public Law 7310, all products of the industrial economic system are of legal lawful necessity prepaid, i.e., everything must be paid for by the government to preclude the charges of high treason against Congress, Secretary of Treasury, Board of Governors of Federal Reserve Bank, and the Comptroller of the Currency. This is an historical, irrefutable fact that has been kept secret from you for over 93 years. Time to wake up, maybe. What can we conclude from these facts? Now, these particular assertions being stated as facts, the following conclusions can be readily arrived at. 1. Pursuing any remedy within the so-called courts is a proverbial barking up the wrong tree, since the so-called courts have an immense financial incentive, as much as $10,000 per day per inmate, to convict any and everyone, innocent or guilty. It totally is irrelevant. The pretend courts only rake in the big bucks upon securing convictions at all cost, or as a compromise, obtain lucrative bribes from its victims. Number 2, there exists virtually no men, women of integrity left anywhere in the so-called judicial system, because potential whistleblowers are not tolerated. The exceptions are indeed far and few between, and those remaining few are virtually powerless to help you. 3. Much as the Chicago mobsters Al Capone was virtually untouchable against the direct activities he engaged in, he was vulnerable indirectly through issues of taxation. Ladies and gentlemen, are you starting to follow where this man's going? The courts consisting of the clerk of the court, prosecutor, deputy prosecutor, pretend judge, and the defense attorney are all profoundly vulnerable to the issue of tax delinquency against their person for the bonds, bills, true bills, being generated off the credit of its accused victims as products of statutes. A product of a statute is nothing different than, let us say, a product of an industrial factory that builds automobiles. All these products are indeed prepaid, yet the people in their profound ignorance are expected to somehow pay for these things, even though after the U.S. bankruptcy, the people no longer could pay their debts at law, since it was now legally impossible. No precious metals backed the currency anymore after the confiscation of the gold by the executive order. We forgot who the real sovereigns are. It is precisely this inability of the people to pay at law their debts that empowers them under Public Law 7310 to be able to exercise their exempt from paying, to achieve set-off mutual cancellation of debt for any and all debts that the sovereign accepts. We are all sovereigns pursuant to the unanimous Declaration of Independence of July 4, 1776, making us subject to no other men, only God, the absolute sovereign. All men are created equal. Now, do you remember? We, being the sovereign, are the only source of commercial energy. SQ, all funds that exist within the economy ultimately belong to the sovereign inhabitant of the land. No government has the capacity to generate any positive commercial energy, only to generate destruction, debt, death, a pure parasitical existence upon the productive energy of the sovereigns. These concepts are not some pie in the sky mental exercise, but are the hard reality that the dark forces fully recognize and go to such lengths to keep hidden from us. With great ingenuity and cunning, the dark forces have attempted to totally neutralize these impediments to achieving total enslavement of sovereigns by making them think they are subject to their servants, the greatest of all con jobs in the history of man. Is there anything we can do? So how do we turn the tables on the greed, total corruption, and infinite evil and control of this wicked system? To assert our sovereignty, to restore the de jure republic, where everyone is a sovereign with no subjects, and put a stop to the domestic terrorism, rape, robbery, and pillaging being committed against the sovereigns. Should we just wait for the promised divine destruction of the entire global system as guaranteed to eventually happen in the scriptures? That admiralty has 1,000% battling average so far. Or, if we have the knowledge to do so, to put into action that can free the unjustly incarcerated and help set up circumstances that can severely curtail, if not cause, to implode upon itself by its own accord, the criminal enterprise impersonating a judicial system. Since the criminal enterprise impersonating the judicial system is protected, supported and mutually profiting from the plunder they generate, all the way to the Supreme Court of both states and federal venues, they actually are in the same one federal system, since the state is a mere federal instrumentality. Then we must seek remedy outside the state and federal so-called government de facto that has a superior position. The United States, all capital letter, and its federal instrumentalities such as the state of Nebraska, Colorado, whatever it is, all went bankrupt in 1933 and went into receivership. The creditor in the bankruptcy is the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, World Bank, which uses their collection enforcement branch called the Internal Revenue Service to service payments into the phony bankruptcy that is being used as a subterfuge to extort money from the people through the income tax scam. And when they're saying money, ladies and gentlemen, they're talking about your time. They're talking about your energy. Your energy would be much better spent with your family and your friends than it would be building a cushion under somebody else's hindquarters. That's a topic for another day. The federal tax forms provide a tool for remedy. The federal tax forms always suggest for use for extortion of funds from individuals is the 1040 form, OMB number 1545-0074. Even though upon examination of the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, I congressionally mandate listing of what this form is to be used for show absolutely no applicability to the subject of individual income tax. It is totally purposeless to protest any aspect of the surrealistic income tax scam. The form totally supports your tax position you will be asserting. An example, Federal Tax Form 1040 filed for John Q. Doe, all capital letters, designates a legal fiction trust entity, is provided. Notice that the perjury statement states that you have examined the return and accompanying schedules and statements you make, and to the best of your knowledge and belief, it is true, correct, and complete. This will work to your favor as well, as we shall see and protect you. I call your attention to line 21 and its attachment, which contains a statement that certain issues were being held by recipients. The eligible issues are the listed items. In the example, the appearance bond for case number CR 555555 was listed, since this bond was issued using your identity as the commercial entity backing the bond. Even though the appearance bond may have only been posted at arraignment and never actually exercised, this changes nothing in the nature of the bond itself. What is necessary to understand is that the bond is issued, posted, and obtains its value, commercial energy, from the credit, commercial energy of the actual living soul, the principal creditor that is being involved, compelled to appear. One may think the appearance bond is a worthless document if not exercised to obtain release until trial, but in fact, it is a commercial instrument having commercial value. Remember, all crime is commercial, equal to the assigned amount. The prison penal bond. In fact, there also exist other bonds issued in a case, which so-called penal bonds, consisting of a series of 3 or 6 bonds, all having OMB numbers 9000045. It is these bonds, not shown in the example, which are all created behind your back without your knowledge or permission, yet receive their commercial energy, your commercial energy from the living soul sovereign. It is our understanding that these bonds are valued at $2 million count, where the counts is the number of counts in the true bill indictment and or counts of conviction. The first 3 bonds are the bid bond SF24, performance bond SF25, and the payment bond SF25A. The next 3 bonds with the same OMB number are the Miller Act bonds SF273, SF274, and SF275, which may or may not apply to a state case as opposed to a federal case. Each bond issued would constitute a so-called roll, so the total sum of all these penal bonds could be 3 or 6 times 2 million times the number of counts. All these bonds are 1099 DID eligible issue. If you were also listing these as 1099 OID eligible issues, the amounts become quite large, and the numbers showing up on line 21 and 64 of the federal tax form 1040 would be considerably larger. For simplicity of example, they are not included, only the appearance bond, but can most certainly be included also. The description of these bonds would be all OMB numbers 9000-0045 bonds for case number CR 555-5555. State of my state versus John Doe, all capital letters. In addition to these case-related bonds, one can also include such eligible issues as traffic tickets, commercial bills of any sort, tax bills, court judgments. In fact, any and all commercial presentments, whether issued to you or by you. Remember, all the products of the economic system are prepaid by virtue of public policy and public law 7310, arising out of necessity of their no longer existing constitutionally authorized money to pay at law with. Once they took away our gold and silver backing the currency, that is mandated by our organic constitution in Article 1, Section 10, making it an impossibility to pay at law for anything, the party government that seized the gold must, under public policy, pay all the bills for us. It is our very inability to pay at law as a result of the executive orders seizing the gold in 1933 that gives us the authority to demand that the items be treated as prepaid, as hard as this might be to accept because of your thorough brainwashing by the global economic prison you have lived in your entire life. Public policy mandate by 7310, House Joint Resolution 192 is an irrefutable fact of life, and many thousands of people have known of this reality all along, but kept the truth from you. The 1099 OID tax, the eligible issue back to source, all these eligible issues can be indeed processed via 1099 DID filing in order to tax the issue back to the source, ultimately you, for settlement and closing of escrow in exchange without money, Treasury Direct, Social Security number. The 1099 OID, it says 1099-010. Essentially allows, but I'm going to say it's the OID. It's a typo. It's got to be. Essentially allows the issuing party to volunteer the issues to be taxed. These issues were previously, in fact, delinquent, deferred taxes that had the appearance of being abandoned property and that you never made any claim upon them. Upon identifying the eligible issues, we force these funds to be set aside in essentially a demand deposit account as federal withholding for recovery as a refund on the 1040 form at line 64. The 1040 establishes the title to the eligible issues. The 1040 form simply identifies title to the 1099 OID eligible issue of both being income to you, line 21, as a federal withholding, line 64. The commercial instrument presentments can only obtain commercial energy value from you. So you are the source, the principal creditor. However, since you never received actual spendable funds when they billed you, they failed to enclose a check to pay with. A dishonor, in fact. The amount in question is all in a withholding status at that time of the filing, the 1040. The 1099 OIDs filed early affected a federal withholding on the funds that were being privately withheld, in reality a delinquent deferred tax, contraband, kept hidden from you unless you learn of its existence and tax it back. A few other items on the line 1040 need to be clarified. Since I have nothing to gain by claiming any exemptions, actually only a partial exemption at that, I simply do not bother and put down 0. It really does not matter. Also, on line 40, I take no deductions because they are irrelevant to me. Now comes the more interesting part on line 44. the tax. Notice that the lines says, see page 37. Does the parenthetically enclosed phrase infer any legal duty you are swearing under penalties of perjury to have performed? Any items enclosed in parentheses or brackets are strictly considered removed from the document in the legal sense, but not always strictly adhered to. However, in an ever more fundamental sense, nothing on this page 37 is in any way legally incorporated as being a part of the 1040 form, which you are attesting to only. Line 44 is somewhat cleverly constructed to trick you into self-assessing yourself some non-zero amount, as any serious student of income tax law has drilled into his head. The individual income tax is voluntary, contrary to everything you have ever been led to believe. Only the taxpayer can assess himself. The IRS has absolutely no legal authority to assess the tax, even though they will try to bluff you. The form, line 44, does not in any way preclude you from entering a zero. Even if they attempted to force you to assess a non-zero amount, you could simply 1099 DID, and I believe it's supposed to be OID, that amount, and tax that back to the source also. They cannot win on this issue. Filing the 1099 OIDs. The example shows a 1099-010 and the accompanying 1096 that must go with it. The two samples enclosed letters show the correspondence sent to the prosecutor asking him to please file the 1099-010. It is also recommended, and I believe that's 1099 OID, ladies and gentlemen. I think what he did was he had a different computer program, and when he changed this over to a format, it changed the OID to 010. It is also recommended that the clerk of the court, all assistant prosecutors in your case, the judge, also be added to the parties contacted. Since the people contacted all will refuse to file the 1099 OIDs usually, even though it is required of them. They will all be in dishonor and become, as such, eligible to appear in the report as a recipient of the payer. The head prosecutor, as far as we are concerned, was the payer, who in actuality was pay from your account, paid from your account, without your knowledge or consent, which translates to stealing your exemption. So in a sense, you yourself were the hidden payer, the prosecutor acting as your agent without your knowledge. Normally, the filer of the 1096 is the same party as the payer, but the fraud perpetuated upon you caused you to have to be the filer out of necessity. Every party who dishonored your request in your first letter has become a holder in due course of the federal tax liability, and hence should be listed as such in a recipient box by stating holder in due course. Date of dishonor is the date of first letter. There can be multiple recipients to the same eligible issue. In a sense, these dishonoring parties, pirates, share the liabilities individually and severally, consistent with the UCC holder in due course protocol. In those cases where you issue as the payer an international bill of exchange, IBOE, or an international promissory note, IPN, the preferred instrument to use is in conformance to the Unilateral UNCITRAL Convention. To say a clerk of the court for a fine or a court cost, the recipient would be the clerk of the court and the payer is you instead of the agent of you, a so-called public servant. Any and everything issued that receives its commercial value from you via your exemption has as its source you. In conclusion, this paper is highly condensed out of necessity. Explanation of what you can do and who you really are. If you are operating with this described procedure, you are in complete conformance to the letter and the intent of the law. The system may choose to attempt to intimidate you into not laying claim to what it is rightfully yours. Do you understand it well enough to be the belligerent claimant? Satan's system does not want you to assert yourself. They will try to intimidate you into silence and acquiescence of the docile economic slave you currently are. All it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. To quote Teddy Roosevelt, one of the greatest shortcomings in contemporary society is the inability of many to distinguish between right and wrong, between good and evil, as well as the lack of the spirit to fight against injustice. Fundamentally, peace and our humanity must be backed up by the spirit to challenge what is wrong. A peace that acquiesces to rampant inequity represents the bleak stillness of a spiritual graveyard. Shutting one's eyes to injustice is not tolerance. It is little more than cowardice and apathy. It is, to those who agree with this paper is dedicated and addressed to. End. Afterthoughts. It was not made clear in the previous discussion how and why this procedure affects the release of the individual. The corpse, body, is being warehoused by prison system as surety collateral for the commercial instruments generated by the pretend courts discussed earlier. The criminal RICO enterprise uses your exemption to provide the commercial energy to give it value. When these commercial instruments eligible issues are taxed back to the source by the sovereign, who in fact is the ultimate source, the accused has now successfully closed escrow on the Treasury Direct accounts, your Social Security number, so no surety can now be maintained on the instrument. Also, since the escrow is closed, the means of stealing from one's exemption is closed off. One needs an open escrow to scam the account. Therefore, they can no longer pay for your warehousing expenses, and the deferred taxes must be set aside for withholding. And if they cannot produce the funds, someone in the system will have to become the scapegoat and go to prison, effectively replacing you. Also, as some have correctly guessed, this method can be used to eliminate mortgages, car loans, and credit card balances, since all these commercial contracts are all totally fraudulent. The so-called lender never lent you any money. They have nothing at risk. They simply stole the funds for the alleged loan from your exemption and tricked you into paying back what they never lent you. This is the ultimate scam indeed. This subject is, however, beyond the scope of this paper. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it resonates within your mind, the words and the teachings and the things that I'm showing you. Brilliant men spend a lot of time to come up with 7-page little ditties to help you, the people of the world, understand what truly is happening. And I hope you find some, I hope this has planted some seeds to get you to start doing your research. Because ultimately, you are the only one that can ensure your freedom. Nobody else can fight for your freedom. No man with a gun halfway around the world is fighting for your freedom. You are the only one responsible for that. And you are responsible for teaching your offspring what true freedom is and how to properly assert yourself and fight for it. All right? In the end, we're all in this together. But you ultimately will be the only one fighting for your freedom. All right? So we can come together, we can pull together, we can share knowledge, we can support each other in court. That's a great way of doing it. But in the end, there's only one man standing up there showing that he's sovereign, that he's free, that all men are created equal. Let he cast the first stone who has not sinned. Ain't nobody going to be able to do that in a courtroom. Sit down, shut them up, and make them do the right thing. Nobody is immune from taxes. They like to tell you they've got 11 judicial immunity. I'm going to tell you right now, ain't nobody immune from the IRS. They are your hellhounds. They are your watchdogs. They are not there to hurt you. They are there to help you. If you're sovereign, if you know what you're doing, if you accept the fact that you have an exemption account, if you accept the fact that you've been robbed from and stolen and everything is prepaid. Everything I read from you read to you off of this letter, the 7-page letter, is absolutely factual and can be found. We'll be looking at publication 950, publication 1212. Okay, those are from the IRS. Go look them up. Look at what nominee is. Look at what payer is. Look at what assignee is. Okay, 950, the Library of Congress. If you go back into congressional records, Congress has provided 11.2 million taxable credits are issued to each and every American man, woman, and child. You have those credits to offset and discharge debts. That's what they're there for. Use them. Use them. Quit being poor. The only reason you're poor is because you're failing to do your research. You are wealthier than you could ever imagine. You have more wherewithal than you could ever spend in 10,000 lifetimes. The fact is, you're willfully ignorant because you would rather be lorded over and told what to do versus becoming educated, having an ascension of the mind, and taking control of your destiny. Thank you for joining us. God bless each and every one of you, and we'll see you back real soon.